Welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from November 5th, 2021. I'm recording this on May 6th, 2022. As always, I give those dates so that you guys know when this information is actually relevant, because the market is obviously always moving and changing, and even a few days from now, these prices could start to be very different. Also, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. They each put out a list of 10. Those are the two lists that we use to see what was hot back then, what factors were making them hot, and see what's happened to those books since, so that we all make a little bit better decisions about what books we chase, what books we're patient on. If you've been following this list, after the craziness of 21, in some ways the list has actually overcorrected, and we've gotten a lot more down, a lot more than we were even getting prior to 21. Like it went from like a 70 20 10 kind of thing on down, steady up, to now it's kind of a 70 30 0 70 31. It's definitely trended back the other way after most of 21 being very evenly split between books that stayed up or continued to climb and fell back. Just the market continues to be in a downward trend overall, or just in a lull, I guess is the best way to put it. We have not had a spring bounce back that we normally get after winter lulls. So maybe we're starting to see signs of it, but the list isn't representing it, at least not yet. First up, though, with our 18 books this week, we have Thumbs #1. This hit the list because Mcfarland went to the internet to say that he was going to make this into a show. My response to that at the time was, where is Spawn? He's going to be making other stuff. He can't even get Spawn made. But anyway, raw copies back then jumped to $20 to $30, and 9.8 hit a max sale of $280, and now it's a $1 to $10 book. I predicted a trap. This turned into a trap. Timeline for Mcfarland making anything seems very far away. So yeah, this was never what I would consider a great bet, and it was not. Next, we have Old Haunts #1. This is the second week in a row. AWA is basically the publisher saying they're going to take this to the screen themselves, is what caused us to hit the list. And the second week, it was $15 to $30 for this book. For raw copies. Now it's a $2 to $15 book. Another one that turned into a trap. You could argue if you bought it on the lower end and you could sell it on the higher end right now, it's not necessarily a trap, more of an I'll be back. But yeah, overall, just definitely take the median values here, and it's definitely a trap. Again, that's something we just haven't had news from. This is very common with options related books. With that, we're going to move into covers, and we got four covers this week. The first cover is a cover I really liked that I had a copy of at one point and I gave away, which was Aquaman #26, the Josh Middleton variant of Dolphin. Raw copies were going for $20 back then, based on the rumors that Dolphin might show up at some point in either Aquaman 2 or something like that. Not really a key related to her, just a cool cover of her here, but this was still $10 to $25. It's actually pretty steady, as most of the sales are right around that $20 mark, $15, $25, with occasionally down to around $10. But you could definitely do better than $20, so I put this as an I'll be steady and I'll be back. If you want to argue with me that it's probably what's worth it, it's right in that range, right along the borderline of between those. Staying right there to slightly up, to staying right there and slightly down. I went with the it looks more like slightly down to me. Next, we have Wonder Woman Black and Gold, #5, the Rose Besh 1 in 25. This is its second week in a row. Last week, when we were talking about it, it was basically, I'd called it an I'll be back. It ended up being straight, when it was a $100 plus book, it ended up being straight cash. By week 2 of it being out, it was up to a $200 to a $225 book. At that point, I reevaluated, still only called it an I'll be back, thinking, okay, it went through the roof in that second week, which occasionally happens sometimes. Although I still predicted that it would fall back, but not under 150, and that's really what's happened. It's a $150 to $200 book. 9.8 is $3 to $450. So this one's down from the main peak, up from the initial rush, but down from the big peak. and definitely an I'll be back from that highest peak of it. So it's just a matter of when you got into it, whether or not if you were early chasing it, then you probably did okay. If you waited till the mad rush was really on, then you probably lost some money a little bit. Next, we have X-Men Legends number 8, the John Tyler Christopher 1 in 25 action figure variant of Wolverine. Back then, this 1 in 25 was going for 40 to 50. You know the rules on that. It normally means it's going to end up between, if it didn't break double ratio, it's going to end up between ratio and double. And that's where this one is basically 30 to 40 bucks. 9.8 will cost you 125 to 135, but another I'll be back book that if you were patient on, you could definitely have done better than the initial rush. Our last cover of this week is Static, Season 1, number 4, the Nicholas Draper Ivy variant that's a homage to Akira number 1. Raw copies of this were going for 30 plus back then. Now it's a $10 to $20 book. 9.8 only going 60 to 80. This one was weird because it hit the list before it was even supposed to be out, but definitely ended up turning into a bit of a trap. From 30 plus down to basically an average of 15. Definitely cut in half. Definitely a bit of a trap. Next, we're going to move into a few Comic Buzz. We actually had a few Comic Buzz books this week. First up, we had Thor number 6. The second print with Thanos holding Mjolnir. If you get the full wraparound, you can see him actually holding it on the cover. This issue also features the death of Galactus. Basically, this was Cates claiming that he was going to come back to this scene in the timeless event. We still haven't gotten payoff on that. We'll see. But this book jumped up to an $8 book. I don't know that it was really that hot. 9.8 hit 75. Now it's a $1 to $10 books, a little kind of in the same range. 9.8, 30 to 80. So definitely turned into a bit of an I'll be back. Next, we have Venom First Host, number 1 from 2018. This hit the list because of a tweet by a writer, but not Cates. This was Rom V tweeted an image of the First Host character basically taking over as Venom. So there were some rumors here. Caused raw copies of this book to jump up to $15. 9.8s were hitting 55. It's a $5 to $15 book. I don't know if this is paid off. I don't know anybody really talking about this current Venom run at all, not compared to what we were hearing during the Cates run. Some of that's just Cates hype, but yeah, this is not being talked about very much, and this definitely turned into an I'll be back. And it's definitely down from back then. Our last Comic Buzz book of the week was War of the Realms, New Agents of Atlas, number 2. First full appearance of Swordmaster, because the rumors were he was going to be the new Iron Fist. This has obviously come to pass. Since then, back then, raw copies were going for 50. 9.8s were going for 250. Now a raw copy will cost you 50 to 80. So raw copies have actually creeped up a little bit. 9.8s are only cost you 175 to 250. So they've kind of creeped down a little bit. So overall, I put this as steady and worth it. You could argue I'll be back. 9.8s are obviously kind of an I'll be back. But the raw copies are probably in the worth it category. Been in about the same range. We'll see how long this lasts and how well this pays off. But yeah, this is ongoing right now. So the speculation here was at least right now you were doing okay if you bought in during those rumors. Next, we're moving into Sony movie related stuff, and we have Amazing Spider-Man 101, first appearance of Morbius. We got a new trailer. Obviously, since then we've gotten the movie. It did not do well. It was not well received. But back then, the trailer caused books to hit at different grades. They hit all-time highs. An 8.5 went for an all-time high of 2450. A 7.5 went for 1500. The book has backed up since then. 7.5 now costs you $7.50 to $12. 8.5 will cost you basically $1,600 to $2,000. As my note here has got cut off. To slightly over $2,000, so $1,600 to $2,100. Raw copies will only cost you $100 to $500 depending on condition. Obviously, super high grade would go for more than that. But this hasn't collapsed completely, but definitely an I'll be back. Borderline trap is what this book has done. Yeah, because Morbius just didn't performed that well at the box office, and I would be very much surprised if we get another Morbius, but who knows with Sony. Who knows what they'll make. But yeah, it definitely did not perform the way people were hoping. Seemed to have been a big disappointment on the Morbius side. Next, we had Morbius the Living Vampire hit the list. So his first solo title also hit the list, but it was only going 10 to 15. There are a ton of these out there. 9.8 did jump all the way up to 200. Raw copies are basically still in that same range, 5 to 25. So they've both directions. You can buy them. 9.8s have definitely backed way up though, 75 to 100 bucks. I put this as steady. I'll be back. I mean, it's because vast majority of sales are raw copies. They really haven't changed that much in value, but you can definitely get deals if you're patient and look for them. So. Next, we have Adventure into Fear, number 24, first meeting of Blade and Morbius. So people were jumping on this because we know we're getting Blade in the MCU. We were getting a Morbius movie that this might be a place where we get a crossover. I cannot imagine Marvel crossing over this version of Morbius with their Blade, that they want to have any real ties to that Sony product, but we'll see. Back then, raw copies were going for $20 to $80, pretty wide range depending on condition. Now it's a $10 to $50 book raw. No real slab sales to speak of at all. So definitely turned into an I'll be back. Yeah, it wasn't super crazy hot then, but yeah, it's definitely an I'll be back. So all these Morbius books have turned into I'll be backs. Next, we have Next Wave, Agents of Hate, number 1, the first appearance of Elsa Bloodstone with her red hair. This was kind of the revamp of the character. They redid her from her original design and changed her personality a little bit as well. Raw copies were going for 70 to 90 back then. Now they're 25 to 100. 9.8 going for 450 to 500. So another book that's been pretty steady, but you can definitely find bargains on the raw side. So I did put it still as an I'll be back. Be interesting. People are specking pretty hard on this character, paying big money for this character. We'll see what kind of actual payoff we get. I feel like we've gotten a lot of short and disappointing payoffs in terms of chasing these spec characters that were coming to shows or things. This is one we don't even know if we're getting yet, so we'll see. Next, we have another ASM book. This is Amazing Spider-Man 194, first appearance of Black Cat. Raw copies for this were up to $550 on average. The 9.8 hit $4,000 because we got an Easter egg in the Morbius trailer that basically kind of referenced a cat burglar. So that's where this just kind of went. Back now, this book I put this book as straight cash because this book has just been slowly climbing over the last several years. Not even really slowly. It's been climbing pretty steadily. In this case, though, this little spike basically has resulted in it being kind of steady and worth it over the last 6 months. 100 to 700 for raw copies. Again, those higher end condition ones are still going to cost you more than what it was going back then. 9.8s have actually crept up a little bit, 43 to 4,600 right now. So they've continued to creep up. This book just continues to move up. Probably was a long, undervalued book, but it's definitely getting some respect now. And I know people are still expecting at some point we'll get Felicia either in a Spider-Man movie or in some other Sony Spider-Verse movie. Next, we got 4 books left. We're going to move away from the Sony and to the Disney Plus side here. And this is Werewolf by Night number 1 from 2020. This is the 1 in 50 variant of the first appearance of Jake Gomez as the Werewolf by Night. Back then, it hit all-time high of 750 for 9.8, followed quickly by a new all-time high of 850 is why it hit the list. And this has to do with everybody talking about that this is the version they think is going to be in the Halloween special. But it's a Halloween special, sort of a one-off. We'll see how much they actually use this character. Now, raw copies will cost you 150 to 200, and 9.8s are down around 700. The last 3 sales have all been right at 700 bucks. So I'll be back. I predicted this was a trap. I was a little overly dismissive of this one. It is held better than I thought, but definitely still an I'll be back. With that, 3 more books. We got Silver Surfer number 53, first appearance of General Aeldon. And this is kind of a one-off character that appeared in this comic. We've had several of these lately that Marvel has actually used them because there's no real history that they have to worry about. But, so the rumor is this character is going to appear in the Marvels movie. But there's also probably going to be gender swapped, which means is this really even the same character? Sorry, in this case, this was not a one-off character. It's 3 appearances of this character. Sorry, I didn't look through all of my notes. But anyway, but it was only $5 back then, although the 9.8 sale of 175 was pretty high. Now raw copies are just 1 to 10, no recent slab sales. So it's another I'll be back. You could have just been patient. We'll see what we get from this character. My guess is they don't amount to much, but we'll see. Next, we got Marvel Premiere number 10. First appearance of Shumagoroth. Basically, there was a toy spoiler for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I have seen it. I will not comment on any of that, but that's what caused us to hit the list. Raw copies were going for $100 back then. An 8.5 went for $750. Now it's a $30 to $150 book for a raw copy, with most of the sales being under the $100 mark. 8.5s are all the way down to $400, basically a trap on that slab side, but overall down. I'll be back. So yeah, and hope you guys get a chance to go see Doctor Strange before it gets completely spoiled for you, although they gave away a lot in the trailers. So yeah, last book on the list this week is Star Wars number 42, first appearance of Boba Fett. We got a trailer for the Book of Boba Fett show, which has also come and went since then. Caused this book to jump a little bit. Raw copies were $200 to $400. 9.8s got all the way up to $4,000. So yeah, this book was very hot prior to the show. I think this show was a bit of an overall disappointment. I don't even really think Boba Fett was the star of his own show. That's my personal appearance. I mean, it was solid, but not great. And this book is definitely down. I put it as an I'll be back, but I feel like I probably should have put it as a trap, really. 60 to 250 for raw copies now. So high grade ones have went from 400 down to 250. 9.8, 25 to 3,500. The higher end still an I'll be back, but that lower end is definitely trap. So yeah, this book has definitely dropped back considerably as we've moved away from the Book of Boba Fett. Don't know if we're going to get Boba in again anytime soon. But yeah, I would maybe even continue to be patient on this book if you haven't gotten it yet and want it. So that is this week's list. 18 books, not a single book went up. We had some steadies. We had one you could argue I maybe should have put, what was it? The War of the Realms, the raw side. You could argue, but because the 9.8 sides actually dropped, the raw side went up a little bit, fell on a steady. But overall, just kind of some steady books and a lot of down, which has been pretty much what we've gotten lately. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.